So we're continuing with talking about Chapter 8, Sexual Behaviors. So last week we talked a lot about, we broke it down into solo sexual behaviors and partnered sexual behaviors and things like that. So this week we're going to talk a little bit about BDSM, and we're going to talk about briefly touch on celibacy, and then also talk about, a lot of what we talked about last week was like, so XYZ sexual behavior, what percent of people engage in like anal sex and things like that. And then, sorry, I lost my train of thought. This week we're going to talk a little bit about like the context of sexual behavior. So, why are you having sex or doing various sexual things? Like to what end and what's the point? Is it just pleasure? And, or is it things like getting closer to your loved one, or, maybe even possible like how to some people like to incorporate an element of sanctity into their sexual behaviors. So that's what we'll talk about today. So here's what we're covering this week. And as far as one thing that I didn't here, let me back up. So we'll talk about Maltz's hierarchy of sexual interaction. She puts all sexual behaviors and whatnot on a scale, on like a 1, 2, 3, 6-point scale, and you'll see this in a little bit, but I'll just leave it at that for now. We'll also focus today on the sexual behavior of college students, and not just behavior, but also like theory thrown into that as well. And Dr. Julie Pomerleau is going to talk to you guys about hookup sex. And she's recorded that lecture, and then I'll have it a YouTube link for that, just like the other ones. So hopefully you're excited about that. I am. Told you we would talk about BDSM, like kinky sex, celibacy, and on the far right here is Dr. Julie Pomerleau. Just happens to be my wife, and she's going to talk about hookup behavior and the psychology of that in college population. If you haven't finished this up by now, make sure that you read the rest of Chapter 8. All of Chapter 8. Some of Chapter 8 is going to be on the final exam. And make sure you read that article by Baumeister and Leary on writing narrative literature reviews if you haven't finished that yet. Alright, so let's get into the actual content here for today. And we'll start off by talking about that hierarchy that I mentioned earlier. I call it a scale, but we'll call it a hierarchy. Is more accurate, probably. And this is her, Wendy Maltz. She is a sex therapist and author of several books. and focuses a lot on sexual abuse and whatnot. But I'm bringing in Wendy Maltz to talk to us about, thinking about like, why are we having sex, instead of just like, whoa, let me learn like all the different ways in which I can have sex. I meant this good and all, but creating an intention behind why we're having sex, I think helps a lot with being satisfied with our sexual activity. So if going in that XYZ sort of sexual encounter and whatnot is just for, hedonic pleasure sort of thing, then, by all means. But if it's to be like make love to your partner, to feel close to your partner and things like that, that's good to know too. And if it's a mixture of both, obviously that's another option, but it's good to know why you're having sex, and to communicate with your partner. If you're having partnered sexual activity, then communicating with one's partner about that is very helpful as well. So this is a quote from our book. The context within which sexual experiences occur is critically important in determining whether they are positive for individuals and relationships. So we will learn what she means by that in a second, like now. So here is her scale, kind of theorizing that, like, when we're not engaging in any sort of let me back up. So this is really just for partnered sexual activity. This hierarchy isn't so much, I meant interaction, Maltz's hierarchy of sexual interaction. Of course, it's going to be partnered sexual behavior. And so she kind of says, I guess when we're just around another person who we may or may not engage in sexual interaction with, then we're at ground zero. Just a general, sexual energy. There may be some sort of sexual desire there for each other and whatnot, but there's no physical interaction yet. Then you have level 1, positive role fulfillment. Level 2, actually making love. In level 3, authentic sexual intimacy. And I find differentiating between level 3 and 2 to be interesting. And then I think that the level -1, 2, and 3 is a little easier to understand. So level 3 being something like rape, and then level 2 being borderline that and whatnot. And then -1, level -1 being kind of a little bit manipulative. And so we'll talk about each of those levels. So level 1, having sex. Why are you having sex? Because I'm supposed to, sort of thing. So this would be, I imagine, something like a woman who is in a relationship where and has cultural expectations on her that she bear children, basically. And she's agreed to this, at least on some level. So I'm not sure if that example is the best example for level +1, but that seems to be what Maltz is kind of getting at. So sex for reproduction is an example. So it's the interaction is generally positive, the sex and whatnot because one feels like you're fulfilling your social role. And so in this, gender roles is important. We'll keep on with my example there. A woman who believes that her role in this relationship or life and whatnot is to bear children. So she kind of feels positive, about the sexual interaction that she's having. It's an important point here to recognize in this level +1 that sex is not intrinsically valuable. So the level 2 is much more sex as being intrinsically valuable, that creating this mutual pleasurable interaction between each other is the end that you're trying to achieve. But in this level +1, the pleasure, there may be pleasure there, but it's not what you're after. So level 2, making love, you do have that mutual pleasure, So, and then you have things involved in that, like sexual creativity. So, this could be like different intercourse positions or what have you, different techniques and whatnot, like synchronized breathing or eye gazing and things like that. I'll leave it at that. And then gender role behavior set aside. So this is not the situation of like the woman I was talking about who's having sex in order to become pregnant. This is, having sex to be close to one's partner and or to, generally experience pleasure and whatnot. So communication is very important at this level because especially about sexual pleasure, because you're trying to kind of in a way achieve the highest level of sexual pleasure that you possibly can with your partner, and people aren't able to mind read, so communicating non-verbally or verbally about what's most pleasing can help one achieve to that level as far as pleasure and whatnot goes. So this level 2 is a lot about mutual pleasure, and that being making love. Here's a quote here: partners reveal themselves more deeply through sexual self-expression and communication that creates greater intimacy. So level 1 is more like because I'm supposed to sort of thing, and I feel generally positive about that. Level 2 is like mostly about creating mutual pleasure with one's partner and some bonding that's going on there. And then level 3 is a little bit different. Level 3, +3, authentic sexual intimacy. And so this is kind of like level 2, but more. So shared sense of deep connection both to oneself and one's partner, with reverence towards the body in the erotic experience. So this is that felt like, so level 2 is kind of like this bonding and whatnot, but this is like even more than that, feeling a profound connection to one's partner. And you see this word reverence towards the body in the erotic experience. And so this is where at the very beginning of the lecture today, I was talking about sanctification, so that the paper that you wrote about as far as sanctification of sex, I think that this level 3 authentic sexual intimacy is kind of like that. Considering your sexual interaction to be holy in some way, sacred in some way. So this element of spirituality on top of mutual pleasure, on top of profound, deep emotional connection and bonding between the two people or more. And then you have this, this is kind of how I understand level 3 to be, this transcendent, profound experience to where that you are, and this is controversial within our field about whether, spirituality even exists and whatnot, but this transcendent experience where while you're having sex, you feel deeply connected to your partner, and also at the same time feel that this experience that you're having with your partner is sacred in some way. And then I'll touch on the level -1, 2, 3 a little more briefly than the first levels. So level -1, impersonal interaction. So you're taking away the personal connection that you would see like in level 2. So it's impersonal. So you may be going through the motions of sex, but it's impersonal. Whatever I can get sort of mentality sort of thing, and maybe even a little bit of manipulation in some way. So another example could be like you're at a bar or a club or whatever, hook up with someone in the bathroom, something like that, and then maybe feel like the next day like, hey, I gave that person part of my soul or something like that, and I feel like a little bit down or cheap about it. So that's kind of what this interaction would be. Not that all hookup sex in bathroom clubs has to feel that way. And so abusive interaction, let me do level 3 first, really. So level 3, this is just straight up coercive sexual interaction, so like rape and whatnot. Obviously that would be, the lowest level of sexual interaction that there is. And level 2 is kind of this in between of level -1 and level -3, starting to become a little aggressive or non-consensual in some way. So maybe like manipulation or whatever, like let's say there's a husband and wife, and the husband's like, if you don't have sex with me, then I'm going to have sex with other people, or something like that. That could be a good example of level -2. So it's kind of abusive in some way and not really consensual. All right, college behaviors. Sexual behaviors of college students. And so, if you haven't already watched the guest lecture, Julie Pomerleau, Dr. Julie Pomerleau, then now would be a good time to watch that. And she talks about hookup sex behaviors and the psychology of it. And I'm going to talk about sexual behaviors in college students a little bit as well. Okay, so let's see. So this was in 1997. I'm sure there's more updated versions of this data, but at least back then, asking people, a lot of college students, how often they masturbate. One of the most interesting stats that I see on here is that about 12% of men say, no, I never masturbate. And so I wonder, or is that 12% of men who never masturbate, are they all asexual? And I think the prevalence rates of asexual people that we talked about under sexual orientation chapter and whatnot was about 1% or so. So I'm not sure if this was true, that these men actually never masturbate and whatnot, but yeah. And then for women, a whopping 40% of these women, I'd be really interested to see if this particular statistic has changed since 1997, but 40% of women saying, these college age women saying that they don't masturbate at all. So another thing that comes to my mind when interpreting these results is, are women maybe a little more inclined religiously, and that's the reason that they're not masturbating and whatnot. So just food for thought. Okay, and so top 15 reasons why college women and men are having sex. I definitely think this is more updated than the other one, but we can see in our book when this study was conducted. But I think it's interesting that the top reason that women and college age women and men give for having sex was, I was attracted to the person. So, it's like, why are you having sex? It's like, because I wanted to. I have this desire quenching thirst sort of thing to satisfy myself sexually. I was attracted to the person. Same thing as like the reasons for having sex. It feels good. It's pretty much the same there. And the second reason women give, I wanted to experience the physical pleasure. All of these are really similar. And I think that the way that this study, they got their information, if you remember, we talked about qualitative research versus quantitative research, and this was probably qualitative research where they asked people, why do you have sex and whatnot, and these are some of the reasons that people gave. And so something a little bit different from just like sexual desire and whatnot would be like number 5 for women. I wanted to express my love for the person. So now that's more relational than the other ones are. And same thing for number 8 for men. And note on this that this is like in descending order. So I was attracted to the person under women in number 1. That was like the most prevalent reason that women, college age women, gave for having sex. Really, a lot of these are very similar to each other. And I wonder, for adults, if this is the same. So let's imagine like a couple who are in their 50s and they have sex, I don't know, once every couple weeks or something like that. And I wonder if it is different. I don't know if attraction may be the top reason, but wanting to experience physical pleasure and wanting to express my love for the person, that may be bumped up some. I would imagine. I would be interested to know that. Oh, and then, so this looks like the same study. Yeah, Elliott and Brantley apparently did a big study on college students and their sexuality and whatnot. And, given the three different positions, man on top, woman on top, doggy style, of course, there's problems here with it just being basically heterosexual coupled sex. But anyway, favorite position for men, 45%, most of them liked a woman, the woman to be on top. And then conveniently, most women want, oh no, not conveniently, most women want the man on top. So apparently everyone wants their partner to be on top. So that doesn't always work out so well. But that's kind of the main thing that I'm seeing in this graph. Kind of the interpretation of this graph is like a lot of people really like their partner to be on top, and that could be for a variety of reasons, like maybe feeling like there's less responsibility for pleasing one's partner. Like if you're on bottom, then you can just receive pleasure and don't have to necessarily focus on giving it as much. And so the rest of the lecture today is going to be like tidbits on a few different topics that I wanted for us to cover. Yeah. Starting off with just like a little definition of what celibacy is. It's basically abstinence, abstaining from any sort of sexual behavior. It's kind of a thought-provoking question to think about. Does this mean, is celibacy also include or require that the person never think about sex? That's kind of an interesting thought and question. But as far as what we're talking about today, this would just be an abstinence from sexual behavior, so masturbation and or partnered sex. Complete celibacy, there is no masturbation and no interpersonal sexual contact. And then partial celibacy is that they do masturbate and but they don't have partner and sexual contact. So it'd be interesting to know, like within different monasteries, like in the Catholic tradition, I wonder if I guess I already know the answer to this, that even all masturbation, I guess, is a sin according to Roman Catholics. But I wonder if, let's say, maybe Buddhist monks or whatnot, I know they abstain from partner sexual behavior, but I wonder about masturbation. I'm not sure. But that's the difference between partial celibacy and complete celibacy. Is the complete celibacy is no masturbation. Partial celibacy is masturbation but no partner sexual behavior. And one of the biggest reasons that people are celibate, so this is a little different from people who are asexual, because people who are asexual just don't have sexual desire and don't engage in sexual behaviors. So, but people who are celibate often have sexual desire but no sexual behaviors. And so they turn this idea of transmuting their sexual energy into good for humanity. that's kind of the idea of celibacy. Oh, I forgot about that. Okay. I'm not sure why I put this in miscellaneous. So sorry about that if that's a little confusing. But now we'll talk a little bit about BDSM. Okay. So BDSM stands for bondage, discipline, sadism, and masochism. And that's what, yeah. So sadism is receiving pleasure from inflicting pain, or, bondage could be part of it as well. But generally inflicting a little bit of pain to one's partner. So this could even be like spanking. Spanking hurts a little bit, and receiving pleasure from spanking one's partner could be some, light sadism. And masochism being receiving pleasure from receiving pain. So the person who's being spanked, receiving pleasure from that experience. Masochism. Some other things that kinky sex can be, dominance and submission. So like whips and chains and leather dominatrix sort of thing going on. Playing around with edging a bit. So getting that sexual arousal to go way, 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 way up, and then to the point that the person really wants to have an orgasm and whatnot, but then drop down in stimulation and whatnot, so that sexual desire isn't satiated. So, and then edging means going really close to orgasm, but then going down. And then there's this sort of frustration and a little bit of pain, I guess, light pain in this edging process. And multi-partnered sex, threesomes or orgies and stuff like that. So it's kind of this kinky sex stuff is kind of what your book kind of throws all together in a corner over here. That's basically sex that's not vanilla, is what it's talking about. So we'll talk about atypical sexual behavior as one of our last topics in this course, and we'll be covering that for a full week. So we'll get to more detail of this stuff then. And looking at, is this a very atypical sort of thing? And so you can ask people on these surveys and whatnot, how often do you fantasize about being submissive or being dominated sexually? And Joyle and colleagues in 2014 found that almost 70% of women fantasize about being submissive towards a partner who is dominating them a bit in some way. And then about 50% have been also fantasizing about being dominated sexually. And I think fantasies are important in that they point to, if we're trying to achieve the highest level of sexual satisfaction for ourselves as possible, then looking at our fantasies and whatnot may be very helpful. And then as far as wanting to dominate, for about 50% of women wanting to dominate and about 60% of men wanting to dominate as well. So what I glean from these stats is that most people actually want to engage in a little bit of kinky sex. So what are like psychological theories on BDSM? Well, I'm not aware of, I don't know if the literature is really all that extensive on this topic to warrant an actual full-blown theory, but of course people have some their own ideas of why people do this. So of course BDSM, people are drawn to either dominance or submission. So something kind of interesting here is that some people are drawn to either one, either to dominate or they're drawn to be submissive. And a lot of times, people who like to dominate a lot in the bedroom are very submissive in their real life or whatever. And same thing about being submissive and whatnot. They may be very dominant, high-powered positions and whatnot, and really want to balance out their energy in some way by engaging in, the opposite sort of interaction with someone. So some other reasons that people may engage in BDSM is that sort of feeling of surrendering and letting go sort of thing. So this is someone who's probably, in a submissive role in the sexual interaction, surrendering to their partner, the situation, their pleasure, and things like that. Helplessness kind of going in there. And I think trust is really interesting, especially for couples who have been together a long time, they're committed, maybe even married, engage in BDSM and whatnot. There's this element of trust. So like, for example, of people playing with knives and whatnot, it's like, just, so this is a knife, and this is the sharp end, and this is the dull end. And so like playing with like the dull end of things in the bedroom and whatnot, there's this element of trust there, because it's like, if this person decided to actually hurt me, they really could. I'm in a very vulnerable position, sort of thing. And so I think that some people like BDSM because of that. Endorphin rush, same sort of reason that I gave just a second ago. So playing with knives and whatnot, that would really get your endorphins and adrenaline and stuff going there. And I talked about that last point. Many people are normally dominant in life, like to be submissive in sex, and vice versa. We talked about that. And just a few other tidbits on this this topic before we move on. I think the prevailing theory in society, at least maybe 50 years ago, is that people who used whip chains and handcuffs and stuff like that were not as healthy, at least their relationships. It'd be like one of two things. One, these people are, people who do this are perverted and sick and all this sort of stuff, and they are not as healthy psychologically as people who do not get engaged in BDSM. And then two, couples who engage in BDSM are less, their relationship is not as strong as people who do not engage in BDSM and whatnot. But research shows that both of these things are false. So one example of a study of this is Wismeyer and Van Assen. They showed that these relationships, where people incorporate BDSM elements into their relationships, are just as healthy psychologically as the other people. We talked about that point about risk being involved a little bit, but to say more about that is that, we're going to talk about sexual coercion and rape near the end of the semester, and different, without getting too like morose here and whatnot, different things like dominating is obviously an element there in rape and whatnot, but that's not what we're talking about today as far as BDSM goes, because BDSM, according to what we're talking about today, is consensual. But there's the person who's being dominated wants to, and the person who's dominating, yeah. So, just an important point there. What's a safe word? I'm sure most of you have heard of this term before, but if things get a little too intense or scary or something like that, having a word that you can say during BDSM type sex and whatnot is good to have. This is from your book. It's imperative that each individual involved is motivated by their own desire to explore and engage in any sexual behavior rather than by coercion. That's what I was just talking about. Alright, so our discussion question for this week is based off of Maltz's hierarchy that we talked about at the beginning of the lecture today. Do you think that level 3, the +3, I'm going to make this. So remember the difference between level 3 and level 2. Level 2 kind of being mutually stimulating each other in order to engage in some sort of intimacy and bonding, but really, pleasure is the focus. And then level 3 is much more, even more about intimacy and bonding and seeing the experience as sacred on some level. So do you think that level 3 experiences are more valuable than level 2 is the discussion question for the week. And then yet again, I didn't really ask you guys about your own sexual behavior because I don't want you guys writing about that and then, submitting that and whatnot. So this is not a very personal reflection question, but this is like the reflection question for this week. Why do you think that college students engage in hookup behaviors? So after you watch Dr. Pomerleau's presentation, you can answer this question well. Also, I think there's a more updated version of this book, but a good as far as further reading, if you're really like chapter 8 sexual behaviors, then this is a good book to dive into. It's written by a psychologist, Paul Joannes. It's really good, especially if you don't know much about sex and whatnot. It's a really big book, and he goes through different chapters and whatnot. I mean, it's pretty extensive, and if you do get it, make sure you get the most updated version, because I think things like gender non-binary and transgender people type stuff, I think is handled better in the newer versions than in this one. But a couple of the chapters at the beginning, kissing and romance, and then orgasms, talking to your partner about sex. These are all chapters from it. A lot of these I can't really read out loud because they're pretty graphic, but different oral sex sort of stuff, anal sex, different topics like technology and how that does things. So there is a section on orientation and gender, so that's cool. But threesomes, piercings, tattoos, yet again a lot of stuff that I can't really say out loud so much. Premature ejaculation, delayed ejaculation, hooking up, sexual behavior, sex in history and popular culture, sex and God, lot of stuff in here for sure, as you would imagine in a 1,000-page book on sex. Yeah. So, I hope that you guys are having a good week. Remember, if you need any help from me, to please reach out so we can either connect via email or a Zoom meeting or anything like that. I hope y'all do well on the exam. And next week, we'll be talking about probably was my favorite chapter, love and communication and intimate relationships, chapter 7. So that's what we'll be talking about next week.